I had to take a chance on this one. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. We're talking about the Gibson X-Plorer today, more specifically the ones from the X-Plorer era. That's right, from 2002 to 2008, the X-Plorer was rebranded X-Plorer as they were trying to be edgy. But besides just your regular models, they also offered slightly shrunken down body versions. And we had first documented one of the very fancy versions in this episode. The one we're documenting today is part of the X-Plorer Studio series, which we're going to learn all about today, but this is the most unique one because it's a little bit different than all the rest. It's a swamp ash body, but it's a natural finish. When's the last time you saw an ash Explorer? Well, maybe it was in my review and demo of the VooDoo Explorer. This one was birthed around the same period, 2002. However, our X-Plorer Studios were first birthed in the year 2003. Later on, you might check out the Explorer Blood Moon. They also came in swamp ash bodies. But as far as a cool natural finish, I honestly, at this point in time, can't think of another Explorer that came in this particular finish and bodywood combination. So I've always wanted to document one of these. But this thing showed up on Reverb. It literally only had 5 photos in the listing, one of them being of the guitar, like this. And then you had one of the case like this. Then we had another one similar to this of the paperwork. The seller's description said, "One of the strings broke when somebody was trying out an amp I was selling." And that's one of those phrases that makes me think this seller probably doesn't know a lot about guitars. Another commonly used phrase by somebody who's selling a guitar that doesn't know a lot about it is "may need tuned" or "freshly tuned." And I think they get that from pianos. Like tuning a piano, that's a big deal. Tuning a guitar, nah, that's pretty simple. So judging by the fact that I was probably dealing with somebody who doesn't know a lot about guitars, I have next to no photos to go off of. You know, I want to document one of these. Let's go ahead and take the risk because I could see somebody put some sort of a trem system on here. Now, I did some research. I believe this is top mounted, so hopefully I can just take that off and nothing will be affected. But anyways, to recap here, in the year 2002, they introduced the X-Plorer Pro. It's this beautiful looking thing. It's got binding, it's got a flamed top, you get the custom bound ebony fretboard with your mother of pearl block inlays. These things are pretty fancy and they've gone up in value considerably just because of how unique they are, despite their smaller size. So in 2003, they introduced the studio version of this guitar. We no longer have the maple cap, we no longer have the binding, we don't have the fancy fretboard. It's very bare bones. However, most of them do not look like this one. They actually have really interesting finishes, ranging from copper, blue, green, red. There was also a yellow one on top of our natural swamp ash, and there appears to have been 2 different runs. Information online is not very good about these things, but they lasted from 2003 to 2005. One version had mini humbucker pickups and a basswood body, and then we have the ceramic humbucker 496R 500T version that we're talking about today. From what I could find on old forums, it appears the humbucker versions might have came stock with poplar bodies, but a little bit more verification might be needed on that. So main things to take away. You get the really fancy boy, then you get the 2 studio versions that had different pickup options and different body woods. But it's an Explorer without a pickguard that's been shrunken down about 10% in dimensions. And due to not having a pickguard, they have to have an additional backplate on them because we don't have the pickguard on the front to hide the routes. So to learn more about this one, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. Here's our results of taking that Stets bar off. I was a little bit worried, but no, there is no giant like Kaler style route because it's one of their retrofit systems. However, what I was mainly worried about was some sort of an outline. Now, we did get a little bit of scratching right here, but honestly, I don't think that was the Stets bar. How this thing works is it just sits on top of your studs, and they're not flush with the body. So technically, that is floating off the top ever so slightly. So those scratches might have been caused at installation. But essentially, it just uses a tailpiece stud to secure it. The whole bridge is actually part of the system, and as you expand your strings to get your warble effect, the whole thing actually moves on top. So if you ever hated how bridges get that ping-pinginess because the strings are moving over the saddles, or you hate how a bridge wiggles, this one's designed to make the whole bridge move so you don't have to worry about any of those tricky contact points. I thought that was kind of cool as an aftermarket trem system. I'll be selling this off on my website if anybody's interested in a nice used one, because I'll be restoring it back to stock. As far as your bridge, it's the regular one of the era, PW branded, and a full weight tailpiece done up in chrome.
Now let's take a look at our pickups. The back of this one just reads Gibson USA, and our bridge is the same. So the online spec sheet just called them a ceramic humbucker, but then I saw somebody else call it the 496R 500T, which would make sense, they are ceramic. However, within the circuit, 16.36 in the bridge, 8.5 in the neck, and then around 6-ish in the middle. Let's take a look at our cavities. You can see where the mahogany neck joins into our swamp ash body, says NS for natural satin finish. And then you can see some wood splintering or something in there. The routes, for the most part, I mean, they're okay. Good enough for this era of Gibson. But DSSA, likely standing for Designer Series Explorer Swamp Ash. Making special mention of the NS Natural Satin. That's right, this one actually is a satin finish. You can see right here where a player's arm has buffed it up just a little bit into a semi-gloss. And I haven't had the other Explorer Studios in hand, but I always thought they were a gloss finish, so we'll have to document one of those one day too. It just might be the swamp ash body lended itself better to a satin finish. You can definitely see the dulled luster of our headstock. This is a 3-piece body. There's like a seam line right here, and then another one in this general area. But they did a great job matching this on the front. It's only on the back when the seam lines become hyper apparent. So we have a volume for the neck, volume for the bridge, and a master tone. With our 3-way toggle switch up here on the horn like it normally is. It's a mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard. We've got our regular 22 medium jumbo style frets. I just gave this one a fret polish, so it's back up in order. And I conditioned that fretboard because it was looking a bit dry, but you just have your regular dot inlays. No binding, nothing too incredibly fancy on this one, but wait until you see the side profile of this rosewood board. I'm a big fan of this because it's a little bit streaky. You get a light streak and then you get a dark streak right there. That really just transforms the side profile view. And then it goes back to dark here. So it's just a nice little treat. Not a uniform color on the side. Kind of makes it look like you have wooden binding. Something else I noticed is the fretboard actually tapers in as it goes towards the nut. I believe that's more so a manufacturing error because this side seems fairly straight. They had to have messed up that board. However, please don't confuse a shrunken body with a shrunken guitar. It's still 24 3/4 inch scale length. So our neck is the same size, it's only the body that got smaller. And it's your typical 12-inch fretboard radius. Our nut measures 1.67 inches. That increases to 2.07 by the 12th. First fret neck depth of 0.82 and 0.88 by the 12th. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. It's definitely a C-shaped neck, but I would say a little bit on the slimmer side, but it's got a nice roundedness to it. Here's a spotlight on the face of the headstock. You can see our truss rod as well as where the cover sleeps on top of it. The cover itself is just plain black, single ply. But for being a studio model with a satin finish, it's kind of cool that they still gave these Gibson Mother of Pearl logos. We got a little bit of finish wear along the top edge here. And somebody has upgraded our tuners to locking grovers, but a little bit more on that here in a minute. Moving on to the backside, you can see what I was talking about earlier, how much more obvious the seam lines are. So this one, not a good match in the slightest. However, this is my favorite piece because it has a really nice dancing chatoyan effect to it. Whereas the other pieces are a little bit more plain, but then there's your other seam line that hides a little bit better. The super ringiness of this piece really contrasts against that. You've got 2 identical Explorer style routes. You've got your Gibson branded pots and your typical wiring with shielding. Got your output jack on the side. And then you've got this really long route for your toggle switch. I'm not sure why they opted to do that. Might have just been for ease of manufacturing. Same route, just plug it in on the CNC twice, have it go instead of having the circular one and then that. Or maybe they did that as kind of a form of weight relief. Speaking of our back plates, bonus, it still has the protective film over top of it. And we've got a strap button down here and one at the base of the heel. I had to replace those with modern day Gibson strap buttons because as part of all the other modifications, somebody put black Schaller strap locks on it. This looks pretty clean on the back, right? If you get it in the light just right, it looks like there might have been a stand reaction right here where the satin finish got eaten away. And just like on the front, this area has rubbed against the player, so it's slightly buffed. It's one of those examples when you first look at it, you go, all right, not too bad. But then when you really start looking with a fine-tooth comb, you'll find other stuff. When I had first gotten it, I thought these marks over here were like gashes or dings or something. Nah, it's just the wood. There is a very small ding on the corner here, but that's pretty common on Explorers. Now our mahogany neck, such a drastic color difference. This also started life as a satin finish, but since it was played a bit, it has turned into a semi-gloss. You've got some impressions back here. It's nothing too crazy. The backside of the headstock is a much better indicator of how this thing started life, because usually you're not touching up back here too much. Do you see the difference? Kinda shiny. Then to the headstock, it no longer does that. However, when they put the stats bar on here, they did swap out the tuners for locking versions. But I had a chuckle of how they installed these things. So the original Mini Grovers had a slightly different footprint to them. So if we zoom in here, you can actually see where this set of tuners initially ended, but they just decided to drill straight through the body of the tuner. I took one off just to show you what that looks like. They did that so they didn't have to plug that and then re-drill it, and I'm very thankful. However, if you look, the new tuners do have a slightly larger imprint, so even if I wanted to go back to the originals, I would still see some imprint there. But if you're wondering what these holes are, the outside 3 are from the original Grover tuner, whereas these inner 3 is from our newer tuner. You can see the bumps right here on the edge. Those are put there to help it stay secure, as well as using your screw. But on really expensive vintage guitars, that's why you should always take off your tuners, because just because it looks right doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% original. So this is one of those times where restoring it to stock doesn't really make sense. No matter what, something will be showing. But our serial number on this one dates it to 2005, very late in the year, 342nd day. Initial batch, 450th as the production number, made in USA. And here she is, back in her full former glory. I just strummed it a couple times. This thing is ridiculously resonant. But let's grab our weight real quick. 6 pounds, 13 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Yeah, this thing is aggressive. It's ridiculously light. It's really resonant. The neck is just a little bit on the slimmer side, not overly bearing. I could imagine solo-y guys would love this, and for whatever reason, the smaller body size just works really well. It's a manageable guitar. Now let's dial it back a little bit and get some clean tones. You can just tell this thing just wants to rock all the time. Now, to be fair, the pickup is like literally almost touching the string. So you could tame that down a little bit if you want to. So we'll simulate that by turning that down to about a, let's call it a 6. Now that we know all about the X-Plorer Studio in the Swamp Ash variety, what are my final thoughts? I really, really enjoyed this guitar. I would highly suggest checking one out if you happen to see one. I'm not sure if they're all quite this nice. I mean, it's got the cool wood grain and everything, but it just feels and plays and resonates so well. Sometimes 496R and 500T can be a little bit too aggressive in some guitars, but this is a really good pairing if you're trying to be aggressive. But at the same time, I thought it sounded pretty good, just really dialed back too. So overall, I would say I made a good calculated risk here. Everything went okay with getting the Stets bar off, and it ended up being a monster of a player. All right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoy your new information on this obscure Gibson X-Plorer model, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.
If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.